Hello and welcome. This is Jenna from McGuire. I'm glad you're here. I tried to make this a 2-card in 10-minute video, 2 in 10, but it went a little long. So this is 2 in 15. But I'm sharing with you today tips for lining up die cuts when you're adding them to cards. I'm hoping these tips are helpful for you in arranging die cuts just how you want them and also saving you time. I will be creating 2 cards using the same products, using leftovers, and they have very different looks. Let's start with this example here. Now for this card and the next, I'll be using the new Gina K Designs Joyful Holiday Kit. I really like Gina's kits because there is so much in it. In this particular kit, there are 2 6x8 stamp sets, those big ones, a 4x6 stamp set, coordinating dies for the 2 bigger stamp sets, several sheets of cardstock, the word peace in a die along with its shadow die, some pre-printed sentiments on white and reverse, so it looks like it's on black, and dies to cut those sentiments out. All of this is included in the kit. The value is so much higher than the cost. The cost of this is very reasonable. I like kits like this because of the value and that most of the things included can be used over and over again. With this kit and not much else, I'm able to create 2 very different cards today. Now first, let's start with this 6x8 stamp set that's included in the kit. It is fantastic. It's a very simple, graphic kind of layering poinsettia stamp set, and it's very easy to line up. It has a unique look to it. Now I'm using my MISTI stamping tool today because I am stamping a bunch of these. I'm starting out with the most solid image first, and I'm stamping this with Hero Art's Pale Tomato ink. I've gotten in the habit of double stamping every time just so I can get a really solid, darker, crisp looking image, but you can stamp once if you prefer. I'm making a lot of these, so I'll do 5 or 6 sheets. Next, I'm coming in with the solid leaf image from that set. I'm stamping this with Gina K Designs Grass Green ink. Now these inks will soften a little bit as they dry, so I'm starting a bit darker than I want because I know it will pull back a bit. I'm not showing the stamping of all the images, but do know I'm doing multiples, so I have a lot on hand. Okay, now it's time to go back to the red image and line up the next image on it. This is kind of the center of the poinsettia, and I'm stamping this with Lawn Fawn Lobster ink, which is a great, true kind of Christmas red ink. I'll stamp that on both. Notice I'm stamping it and then rotating it 180 degrees and then stamping it again. That's a huge time saver when you're doing lots of images. Also, I like to give an ink a little bit of time to dry before doing another layer, or you can heat set it. That's why I switched between the red and the green there. Okay, now it's time for the next layer of the red poinsettia. This I'm doing in Concord and 9th Poppy ink. These images are very easy to line up, and that's one of the things I like about this kind of graphic look. So after I've stamped that, it's time for the last layer of the poinsettias before we do our heat embossing. This one I'm doing in Gina K Cherry Red, which is a nice dark red for Christmas. Okay, so then I did the additional layer of the green leaves, did that off screen. That is in Gina K Fresh Asparagus ink. And now I'm coming in with the detail layers for both the flower and the 2 leaves. Now this one I thought it'd be fun to do gold embossing. So I'm using my anti-static powder tool, and then I will stamp these images with VersaMark ink. I might as well do them all at once to save some time. This is just a clear sticky ink. Mine's getting a bit dry, so I'm double stamping it to make sure that it gets a crisp image. I then can rotate the cardstock to stamp the others. This method of rotating to do an additional image is a huge time saver when you're doing multiple images. Okay, so now we can add our gold embossing powder. I'm using Hero Art's gold embossing powder, but you could use whatever you want. I thought it'd be fun to have gold for those detail lines in the center of the flower and the leaves. This really makes the image pop. Off screen, I die cut out all the flowers and leaves that I stamped. After doing so, I decided the center of my flowers were a little bit too light. So instead of re-stamping, I'm just going in with a small blending brush and adding more of the cherry red from Gina K Designs towards the center, which really kind of gives it some depth and makes it stand out even more. Since I'm doing that over embossing powder, I do buff it clean with a dry cloth to get rid of any of the excess ink that is on top of the embossed images. Now it's time to create our card. This is a 5x7 card, so that card panel where all our die cuts are glued needs to be bigger. So I'm using a new die set from Gina K Designs called Master Layouts 8. This die set has lots of basic dies that are great for all cards, but the two larger rectangle dies are great for 5x7 cards. So there are two larger rectangle dies. The smaller of the two is 4¼ by 6¼ inches with faux stitching on the inside edge. Then there is a rectangle die that's very slightly larger to create a perfect mat. Well, I used the smaller of these, that's 4¼ by 6¼ and cut that from white cardstock. I am going to hold that to the back of a sticky mat. This is a sticky mat that I use in my MISTI stamping tool and a lot in my videos. I'll link to it below. I'm taping that piece on the back of it, and now this will help me to arrange my die cuts and plan where they will go. So I'm putting all those die cuts that I created before arranged on this. By having the cardstock behind it, I can kind of know what spacing I need to do and the amount of area I need to cover. So I keep playing around until I'm happy with the position. That sticky mat helps to hold them so they don't move around as I'm planning. Once I'm happy with all the placement, I can remove that white cardstock from the back, or you can leave it there if you want to. Now, you know me, I like to layer up my cardstock pieces. So I die cut a bunch of these same dies from regular white cardstock, some scrap pieces, and I'm gluing 2 of the die cuts behind each of our stamp die cuts. So there I glued 2 together. Now I'll lift this one off the sticky mat, put it on top of the other 2, and then put it back in place. This gives me more dimension. I could have done this before I did the arrangement, but I didn't know what I was going to do. As I was arranging the flowers and leaves, I decided I wanted some dimension. You could totally skip this extra dimension if you wanted to. Now, the advantage of doing the sticky mat for this process is you can keep moving things until you're happy with the placement. If you use glue directly on your card, you might not be happy with where you put things. Once I'm done with that, it's time to transfer it onto our white cardstock piece. I put my white cardstock back underneath the mat. I should have left it there in the first place. I also used this same die to cut from a piece of Masking Magic from Gina K Designs. You could use press and seal here. You could use any masking paper. It doesn't matter. You're going to put that on top of your die cuts, lining it up with the white cardstock piece that's on the other side of the sticky mat. This will hold all of your die cuts together. If you don't have masking paper, you could even use masking tape and do strips of it. Now I flip this over and remove the sticky mat. The sticky on the masking paper has much more stick than the sticky on the sticky mat, so I'm able to remove it and all my die cuts stay in position on the masking paper. Now I can apply adhesive to the back of all of these die cuts. I'll use Gina K Connect liquid adhesive because it holds well. Once I've put adhesive on the back of the die cuts, I can take our white die cut cardstock piece and put it onto the adhesive, lining it up with the masking paper that's on the far side of it. Then we can flip this over and give it some time to dry. Once it's dry, we can remove that Masking Magic paper. I will save that piece of masking paper for another project. I actually just stick it into my cabinet door to save it there for future use. We can cut off anything that's hanging off the edge of that large white die cut. And remember, that white die cut has faux stitching on the inside edge. It's from that Master Layouts die set, and it is 4¼ by 6¼ Now it's time to add a bold sentiment to the background, and I'll be using this same die on both of my cards today. This is the Gina K Designs Love and Joy die. The nice thing about this is it's designed for a 4¼ by 5½ inch card, but it works great for this 5x7 card too. Off screen, I used that die to cut twice from red cardstock and once from red glitter cardstock. The letters that pop out, I glued together. So it's 2 red cardstock letters with red glitter cardstock on top. Now I'm using one of those negative space die cuts and just temporarily taping it onto the front of our card panel. That will give me a guide to place all of those layered die cuts. This is a great way to use these kind of word background dies creatively. You can just use the letters instead of the negative space. But by holding the negative space there temporarily, I have a guide to make sure I get the placement just right for each of the letters. So I put some Gina K Connect liquid adhesive into each of the openings, then laid the letter on top. I gave it some time to dry, and once it was dry, I can remove the negative space, and all my layered glitter letters are in place and perfectly spaced. That is a great tip for any of those large backgrounds that have words cut from them. You can use the negative space or all the individual letters. Now remember earlier I showed you the Gina K Designs Master Layouts 8 die set, and I said that there was a slightly larger rectangle die that would serve as a mat. I cut that from red cardstock, and now I'm gluing that to the back of our layered card panel. I love the small trim that this gives, no measuring necessary. And then I can add that onto a 5x7 white note card. Now for an additional sentiment on this, I'm using some sentiment strips that are pre-printed that are included in the kit that I showed you earlier. They have some that are white with black text, and then these are black with white text. There are coordinating dies in the kit that allow you to cut these out very quickly. So I cut one out and I'm gluing it as is onto the front of our card. Stay tuned to the end of this video. I'm going to show you something cool that you can do with these pre-printed sentiments. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so I added that to our card, and I also added some Trinity Stamps Gold Satin Baubles. I just kind of scattered them in the background and put some large ones at the center of a couple of our flowers. Here's a closer look at the details. I really feel like layering those die cuts makes a big difference in the end, but you could definitely glue them flat if you prefer. I also like that we included some glitter paper and some gold satin baubles and gold embossing powder. So there's lots of shine to this that makes it extra special. I hope that the trick that I showed you with the sticky mat is helpful in getting a great placement and saving time. I also thought it would be fun to stamp with the Gina K Peace on Earth stamp set onto the coordinating envelope. This is a 5x7 envelope, and on the front I stamped one of the large greetings towards the bottom left, so there's plenty of room for an address, return address, and a stamp. This stamp set is beautiful, great to stamp in the center cards, but remember it's also good for stamping on your envelopes. Okay, now it's time for our second card, which has a completely different style, but uses leftover pieces from the first card. Now I have the negative space of the two red die cut letters and the red glitter die cut layer. Before we just use the letters, this time we're using that negative space. I like that this also has a faux stitching on the inside edge, although you can't really see it with the red glitter paper. So I'm stacking all three of these together, again to give it dimension. You could skip the layers if you prefer. I'm also using the other 6x8 stamp set included in that kit that I showed you at the beginning. These adorable penguins, and there are coordinating dies available. I stamped one of the penguins and colored him, and I actually cut him out by hand, just because I prefer to not have the white trim for this particular card, but you could use a coordinating die if you want. When I cut it out by hand, I like to use a black pen to trace around the outside edge to give it a defined look. I just did basic coloring of that image using Copic markers, nothing fancy. On this card, I also used the new Gina K Designs Peace, Love, and Joy stamp set. This one I think is the incentive set that you get free if you spend a certain amount of money over at Gina K Designs. I thought those snowflake corners would be great on the top and bottom corners of our note card. This note card is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, and I stamped the snowflakes with Gina K Designs Sea Glass ink. Now I'm gluing our red layered piece right on top of that. Then all I have to do on this is add our little penguin. So the penguin is going to replace the O in joy. That's one of my other tips with these large word background dies. You can just replace some of the letters with something different, maybe a poinsettia or a little critter. Here I did a cute little penguin, and it just fits in there nicely. Now it's time to add a few details to this. I have a little white pom-pom here that I'm holding between my fingers and cutting in half. That just makes it a little more flat to add to our card. So on the flat side of one of these halves, I'm gluing it onto our little penguin's hat. So it has a little fluff ball on the top there without too much dimension. Then I will use my black glaze pen to add some dark glossy shine to the eyes of the penguin. Then I will use Ranger Glossy Accents to add clear glossy shine onto the red heart so it would stand out a bit more. At this point I wanted to add some embellishments, but I didn't want to add anything else sparkly. So I'm using this older Hero Arts Confetti Snowflake die. It's just a background die that cuts tiny little snowflakes, and I thought I'd use those tiny snowflakes as accents. So I die cut them from some pool cardstock, and I just glued a few here and there onto our card. It doesn't add sparkle, but it adds a little bit of interest. I matched this up with a turquoise sea envelope from Gina K Designs, and again the overall size of this card is 4 1/4 inches by 5.5. I was able to use that leftover negative space from our first card to create this card that has a completely different look. And to make the envelope special, I stamped Merry and Bright on it, and that's from this 4x6 stamp set that's included in that Holiday Joy kit that I showed you at the beginning. Before we go, I wanted to show you something special you can do with those pre-printed sentiment strips, like the one I have there on the word joy. This is a great way to get more from those strips. So I'm adding foil to them. You need a thermal web deco foil. This happens to be one of the Gina K Designs specialty ones, and you just cut a small piece off of that. I have my Happy Holidays pre-printed sentiment strip that's included in that kit that I showed you earlier. I have a piece of folded parchment paper. You can also use folded typing paper. In that, I'm putting the pre-printed strip, then the foil on top of it. Make sure it's deco foil. That works best for this. I then am running that through a hot laminator. Any laminator would work as long as it applies heat. Once it runs through, I can remove my parchment paper and the pre-printed strip and the foil, and check this out. The foil sticks to all the black printing. And look at that sparkle that you get. Perfect foiling, absolutely perfect, better than any pre-printed foiling I've done before. So I just wanted to mention that. I didn't use it on my card, but it's definitely worth knowing that these strips are great for foil. So I guess this should be a 2 in 20 video because it's just under 20 minutes, but I wanted to share with you these tips for getting good placement of your die cuts and also making the most of your leftover pieces. If you're interested in the supplies that I use, they are linked below in my YouTube description. At the top of the description, there is a link that you can click for a visual supply list, so it's easier to find what you're looking for. You can also click over to my blog where I have photos and you can save projects for future reference. At the end here, I have a couple other videos linked that might be of interest to you. I really appreciate the time that you spent with me today. Hope you have a good one, and we'll see you soon.